passing of a well-respected and well-known farmer from the Central Southern District, Mervyn Frew, that I just learned just before. So it's quite distressing for a lot of people. The Frews are a prominent farming family from Central South, and so that loss will be felt very widely through the conservation community as well. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I want to also, while I'm at it, talk about the cyclone. It's in the front of everybody's mind as we come into this meeting. I think it's going to be quite pertinent with this committee moving forward and some of the learnings coming out of that response. And I'm quite heartened to see some of the actions coming from South, and especially just recently announced, is it $1 million coming from Ngāi Tahu going up north. So that's pretty impressive. And farmers, John, is starting to organise themselves through the industry providers up there and getting funds and resources to the need. Is that correct?
Yeah, just last night got a sort of a joint agreement between all the major suppliers to allow transfer of donations and down here in the store accounts and cash donations, which will be used for rebuilding these farms in the long term as well.
It's really pleasing to see how people are coming together. So
might be able to add a little context around the money that Ngāi Tahu has contributed to, if that's all right, Pete.
Yeah, that would be good. Thanks, Gal.
I prefer to do it in committee rather than.
Okay, we will do that too, because it's just hot off the presses. Rightio, we'll move to apologies. I've got a rolling apology from our chairman, Nick O'Hara, who's been in and out of the building today.
He's not. It's an apology.
He's a full apology. We've got our lead, Paul. Paul's online, can't be here in person. It's not an apology. Anyone else? I'll talk for any other apologies. Yes, Gal.
I was leave 15 minutes early, backward to 3.
Okay. Thank you very much. Anyone else? Okay, could I move those, or someone move those? Thanks, Lyndall. In second. Thanks, Jeremy. All those in favour? Against? Thank you. Move next to declarations of interest. Anyone got anything to declare? Is any conflict? Paul? Okay, I take that as a no. I'll just reiterate too, as I understand, it's the members' responsibility to declare. It's not up to anybody else but yourself. So just leave that in the future. So we're going to move to item number 4, public forum. Now we have the two chairs, Dave and David from the Reti Catchment Liaison Group, are going to join us again. If you'd like to come up to the front, please. Thanks very much. So shall I provide a wee bit of context while you're here to visit us again today, or would you like to do that, David?
I pretty much do that on the introduction.
Thanks very much. It's all yours.
Oh, well, I think you know the two of us, David Marshall and David Rose, were the newly elected and ongoing co-chairs of the Reti Catchment Liaison Committee. We're here today to apologise for a word we used on November 17th, being bullying. That was the wrong word. And we're also here to add some value because we want to talk about the issue as well. So with that, I'll defer to our chairman's report that was I used yesterday, that gives a bit of context, and then we'll move through. So of late, we have seen many examples of the sheer devastation Mother Nature can unleash in our North Island catchment environments. The scenes are hard to believe, but the wake-up call for us all is how could we rebuild our lives and recover? New ways must be found to stretch our precious ratepayer funds to lessen bureaucratic processes, which often lack common sense and hold back new solutions. Another year on the gravel extraction trial at Apuro another year on the gravel extraction trial at Apuro still has not happened. Frustration saw Dave and I addressed the November 17th Environment South and Rural Services meeting to proactively inform council of our frustrations. Unfortunately, we used the wrong word bullying in highlighting frustrations with Fish and Game. We subsequently apologised by writing to Fish and Game directly and copying all councillors in, and again apologising at the combined liaison meeting of November the 30th. Fish and Game have had no contact with us since, but have contacted your Deputy Chief Executive Paul Hulse to make sure we are here today to apologise. And we are. We're here today to apologise for the word we used on November the 17th. Dave and I have no problem with that, and now we consider the issue closed. What we do have an issue with is the way Fish and Game deals with opinions on engineering issues, way out of their expertise, and without relating it back to Fish and Game implications. We have said we believe a working group on this issue to hear others' views is a much better way forward than dealing with staff on a one-to-one basis. For good leadership should balance everyone's opinion, and we all want to understand and hear others' opinions firsthand. If our trial at Apuro works, we will have alleviated an overtopping issue and used a commercial solution to make our ratepayer dollar go further. We cannot just put up rates every year. We thank council for finding a way for the truck crossing sediment trial. So this is the trial prior to getting the consent to do the activity. We needed some science. So this trial to proceed to get some actual science to inform the consent without having to get another consent. This must happen very soon so the activity can proceed while the river has low flows rather than deferred another year. The glacial pace of progress is not acceptable. So I guess with that, we'd say we talked about this at our liaison meeting yesterday, and Zane was with us here today, which was great, about doing the trial. And at that time, Paul hadn't actually got out. So although you can go ahead, he still wanted to touch base with the interest groups. And Zane, I think yesterday, we can correct me, but I'm pretty sure he said he's quite happy for that trial to go ahead once he sees how it's going to be done. And I've talked to Shannon Robush this morning, and he's got a procedure they're going to work through, and we're looking at bringing the consultant down to do the testing and get some science to put into the consent application. And so hopefully that could happen if everybody ticks off in the next couple of weeks, and hopefully the consent can get approved as well and not be deferred for another year. I think we're in year 4. Yeah. Yes. So we're really keen to get some action. That's why I talked about it being glacial. The one thing that was also highlighted yesterday, as I did in those few comments, it's so important to actually make face-to-face on these issues, because they seem to go round and round, and when they go through staff and come back and go, what was that about? So we can get together if there are any problems so that it's not held up, and we can understand where we're coming from and try and find a solution, because when these things run into a roadblock, years go by and it's just not really acceptable at all. The other thing we thought that was of interest is that we did a tour in September, and the reason that you were invited really was because you're all in election mode at that stage. But I think it's really important that with the amount of reports you read, to add meaning and perspective, that you actually go and have a look. And there's quite a few issues up at Moreston, there's a huge build-up of gravel, there's a bridge there, there's a chance it could go around the bridge. I think it was written to NZTA, but hasn't had a reply, but then we haven't been talking to district council as well, and surely everybody's worried about a bridge. I mean, you can see what's happened further north. So, you know, going and having a look gives you a good perspective. The Red Hill Quarry, you spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on that. But when you have a look, you go, well, I'm not too sure about how that's going to go. But it's nothing, and gravel is their number one issue, isn't it? So at the moment, what we're doing, we're spending a lot of money on rock, whereas in some places, removing a gravel bar or whatever that would change the flow a little could alleviate that. And we've seen examples of that.
Yeah.
I think that's about it. Do you want to get
No, not really. Look, it's the reason we're here again is accumulated through frustration, and you know we shouldn't have to get to this point having to be put under this sort of pressure to try and get things moving, and we need a working committee that involves councillors, Fish and Game, Doc, and one or two other people. That's going to be the easiest way forward for some of the challenges that we're going to see, especially on the Arete and the Mataran over the next time.
Thanks very much.
One thing we didn't mention is that last year our rates, we approved a 6% increase. Yesterday we approved a 4.5%. So it's not,
Yeah, thanks very much. Look, we'll just give a couple of questions from the committee here, just on clarification, I just might add too. So if there's anything coming forward from the committee.
Yes, given that this term trial, I assume that that's still controlled by the water plan, and that if you undertake an activity that requires a consent, it needs a consent, it can't be done without a consent. So we're talking about the same thing.
So through you, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And look, there's been a number of matters raised that we'll go back, and I think we're already having conversations with staff. So obviously anything that happens needs to be subject to the regional planning provisions, and we'll go back through staff to actually have those conversations, both on setting up the working group and then the advancing of the trial that David's talked about. So absolutely. Yeah. And I think I imagine from the liaison committee yesterday there will have been conversations that are underway. So I see Randall's not. Oh, Randall has just arrived. So we'll follow up after this and confirm the next steps in terms of what David and David are talking about.
Yes, Linda.
Thanks, Chairman. Just to clarify, who are you envisaging would be the host organisation for the working group? That you.
well, I mean, it's obviously should be council. I mean, it's not something that we would run. I guess the working group is about if there's seemingly some roadblocks or some difference of opinion, that you come together and talk about the issue, and then you can find a way through it rather than writing letters and dragging on for weeks, months, and in this case, years. So, yeah.
Well, could we leave it there?
Mr. Chairman, can I provide some comments from Fish and Game's perspective on some of those points?
This is we'll talk about that afterwards.
Can we talk about that afterwards? I'm sorry, we've got a procedure to follow here.
Yeah, okay. I just want to be able to address some of the allegations that we
Yeah. It's probably just not appropriate at the moment. Thank you. So look, I'll just wrap this up. Thanks very much for coming in. Apologies are hard to make. I think you made a decent job and a decent of that. What I would say is the challenges amongst the groups is that while it's very easy to look at your own particular issue as you're doing, the challenge for us is to look at the horizon and the big picture across the entire region of where we're going. And that's to Randall Beale's presentation yesterday. That's our future challenge, most definitely. So thanks very much. And
Thank you for your time.
So let's move to the confirmation of the minutes. I assume everyone's had a chance to read that. Is there any adjustments to that, those minutes anyone would like to make from the previous regional services meeting?
I'm happy to move them, Chair.
I'll have a second them.
Thank you very much. All in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. So, number six, any notification of extraordinary or urgent business that we need to attend to? See anyone rushing forward, so we'll just keep moving along there. Questions? Have you got any urgent questions that need to be brought forward? Okay, same again. We'll move to chairman and councillor reports. Surely someone has a report that they would like to table. No? Anyone been out and about at meetings or anything like that? Anything interesting? We're all enthusiastic today, aren't we? Right. Page. So we go into the items now. So item 1, T Waituna Charitable Trust report. Is Nick?
So next up here, but I'm happy to answer any questions in the report.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions regarding that report from the trust meeting? When was it held? In December, so that was last year. It's a wee while ago.
This is just in regards to item 1.
Yes, Jimmy.
Yeah, just in regards to this, I think probably within this council is just around the area specific land the ES is owned. I think I know Linda has brought it up at some stage too, just in regards to especially the new people around the council, the whole council, to understand the ownership and what, basically give a pretty good briefing on how it works and what our land's doing or what we own and what's the future looking. I know there's a wee bit of it in here in regards to wetlands and that construction, but it'd be good to have a session on that at some stage.
I think that's
That'd be a future.
I
So
think it's a really good idea, and Lyndall had suggested that if we could note that, so maybe a briefing tacked on the end of an existing meeting or a workshop would be quite good.
If I like, Gemma, it's probably more than half an hour required.
Okay.
Because I think there's some historical, understanding for all of this, because it's quite complex and I've heard it a couple of times myself and I'm still confused. So it could be extensive session than that perhaps, and options for future as well, because we've had some considerable investment that we need to manage very carefully going forward. So absolutely would love a session.
I think that's a good idea, and the work going on down in that area is really important because it's going to be important for the whole region how we roll out the changes that we want to make in years to come. So,
and there also whether I know I've been down there for a drive and been shown a few of the blocks and things, but it's actually quite good to be on feet on the ground and understand going on where everything lies. So maybe able to fit that into.
yeah, that's a good idea. It certainly makes a difference.
So if we make an action from that, Mr. Chairman, to arrange council briefing, council and Te briefing. Obviously, Whakamana Waituna, the project has been an extensive program of work over the last 5 years with significant investment from this organisation, but actually also from Ministry of the Environment, from Ngāi Tahu, Fonterra Living Water and Southern District Council. And as I said, it's been an extensive program, including, but not only, land purchase to help with the lagoon management. So understanding the scale of that project and what's been achieved through that project is really important, but there's obviously a wider context in terms of Waituna as an FMU, the people that live there in the community that we work with who have an interest in both the catchment and the lagoon. So taking some time to understand that. And then as Councillor McPhail's raised some of the the questions around land management, the land that Environment Southland have purchased. There is land obviously through the project that is now under direction of Te Waiparere. So there's, understanding all of that, I think it would be extremely useful for this committee, but also for Board of Council.
Thanks for that. Yes, Carl.
In terms of interest, of course, Nicola and myself are both the co-chairs of the trust, so can we just note that?
So back in the declarations.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, so this workshop that Councillor Ludlow is suggesting, is that to get a better understanding of what's going to happen here in the future in relation to the FMU, as well as the management of the lagoon, raising and lowering and opening and closing? Is that what this is intended to do? And that we...
So I just made a broad comment around the actions in that area and how we're trying to move forward with it. Could be a good lead into other actions in the province and the catchments when it comes to catchment limits and plan change. So I wouldn't like to call it a pilot, but it has a bit of that to it. So it's really important we get it right. And I think Lyndall and Jeremy are absolutely right. We've got to spread the information out through the council and get better updates for us.
So again, through you, Mr. Chairman, Councillor Rodway, I would suggest that there's probably quite sufficient topic in terms of the history and also the Whakamango Te Waituna work programme and the partnership elements of that, how important that is. I will speak with other staff around sort of the next steps in terms of plan change to Tuatahi and manage the whole next steps in terms of limit settings and so forth. That's a conversation we need to have with the policy and planning team around what level of conversation we're up to in terms of that.
Okay.
But it's absolutely relevant in terms of this catchment.
So could I have, if everyone's reasonably happy, no further discussion, have a mover to note that thank you. All those in favour? Carried. Okay. Installed. Right. We'll move to the Biosecurity and Biodiversity Operations Division update. Oh, Shelley, you're here already. Brilliant. Okay, so I assume the report's been read. If you'd like to make some comments on that and then invite some questions from the committee.
So for you, Mr. Chair, so I'm going to take that the majority of the paper has been read. It's been Q2 is always really busy for bio because we're out in the field. It's when we start doing a lot of our field work. So a lot of work happened in Q2. Just to point out that there is also included in the report an update from Predator-Free Rakiura, which was provided by Rob Phillips as Environment Southland's representative on the trust. But happy to answer any questions you've got on the report.
Yes.
Just in regards to, essentially right at the beginning here, action on the ground fish passage projects. Just wanted to know, you've observed some landowners are opposed to the surveys. Is it a small percentage, would you say? I'm just trying to get a feel for.
It is still reasonably small percentage of people that are just looking at the potential oncoming changes to legislation and are a little bit more hesitant to let us on than previously. But it's definitely there. It's definitely present.
Yeah, so it's obviously something that's going to be, it's taking a bit of interest in the rural area.
Further questions? I see really, we've got quite a bit on Predator-Free Rakiura. Would it be worth a presentation to this committee? We had one in the past, or not recently anyway, by some of the leads of the project, because in the context of Southland, it's quite a significant project, isn't it? And we need to be thinking about what sort of support we can throw in behind it as the council and promotion we can give it. Would that be a good idea for at some stage to have a presentation of this council? Maybe our ex-chief executive could even come along and
So yes, we have had presentations directly to this committee and council in the past. And we were hoping to put one on the agenda for May, so for the next Regional Services Committee, if that's all right with you, Chair, to do a full presentation on this topic.
Mr. Chairman, just a couple, the Douglas fir incursion into the, on those ultramafic soils, that's West Dome, I suppose.
Takatimus and West Dome, and we're finding it particularly on the those soils, but we are seeing it in quite large areas of Southland, around Mid Dome as well. So we're beginning to find Douglas fir popping up in multiple locations.
So what can we do about it?
So we are putting together a bit of an action plan. We're trying to first identify where all the sites are that where Douglas fir is going to be a problem. We're going to start working with landowners, those affected landowners at those sites. There are some rules within the regional pest management plan that we will be looking at using to for compliance where we can. We need to keep working with the Ministry for Primary Industries around long-term funding for wild and conifer control. And we need to be making sure we're making the most of our wild and conifer budgets. But it is something that we have some tools, but we don't have enough tools to really deal with the scale of the problem.
That's not looking good.
It's a concern, yes.
Councillor Evans, did you have a
Yeah, the chalky, the rat version stoked up chalky. I know that this has just started. Is there any early results from that?
I would refer probably to the Department of Conservation. So our role has just been to provide a little bit of staff support and accommodation support because we see it as a significant project. But yeah, the department would be best to answer that question.
Would you like to do that in your update file?
Yes.
Or would that be okay?
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you very much.
And the department's very grateful for the support of the regional council. Thanks. It's been very good.
Noted. Councillor Rodway, you've got a question.
Please agree, 25th. I have some troubles. Thank you. On the long term, what it's going to look like. And whether or not we're making progress, what the actual specific goals are. Like, 5 years, 10 years time. Is that what this report is doing, or do you have a it's a very it's an annual program, but it seems to me to be beyond the realms of possibility. When you think about it. So I think it needs a bit more structure or something. People like Estelle have a clear picture in her mind what she wants Bluff Murray to be like, but whether we can achieve that more widely is something that I do have concerns about.
So I agree it's an incredibly ambitious goal. And we need to be ambitious if we're actually going to deal with those pest problems at a national level. So we need to be super ambitious. The role of the new coordinator is to support groups like Motupahui and the work that Estelle's doing and the other groups and try and join it up so that we're working at a larger landscape scale and so that we are really building on the great work that's happening in small locations and trying to build it together and build up that bigger and bigger picture in defendable areas that we can really maintain the game. It is a massive challenge. There is a lot of complexity, but we are definitely making progress in the areas where the work is happening. So it's how we really make the most of that and turn it into a one.
You're talking about things like possums and rats and stoats and mustelids, and those are the three main ones. You're not very worried about deer or cats, the other one, of course.
So the National Predator-Free 2050 project is mustelids, rodents, rats, not mice, and possums. Within that, other projects are allowed to look at species that are really doing harm at their place and species that they may want to choose to look after. So for instance, the Predator-Free Racura project doesn't have mustelids because there's no mustelids out in Racura, but they're very concerned about, we're very concerned about feral cats and hedgehogs. So the project is including those species. So the national goal is the 3 big groups of species, but each individual project.
Could I ask Estelle, because I know that you've got a lot of involvement at a local and national level on predator free, if you'd like to.
Chair, Ellie, thanks. I actually just got back from Auckland from a Predator Free 2050 Limited board meeting yesterday, so I can assure you there's lots happening in this space. We now fund 20 large landscape scale projects across the country that are achieving at different levels suppression to eradication of those 3 species. Of course, rats being the most difficult for all projects to tackle, but we see it as a process of holding the line until the technology is developed to get us to 2050, and it's rapidly approaching the time and the technology. So we're funding through our products to projects some exciting new technology to drive predator-free alternatives to 1080, trapping technology, cilium networks, and all those sorts of tools that many of the groups that we fund are using now successfully. So there's lots happening, and while it might seem like it's unachievable, if we can nail Racura, then, you know, and if we can't, we may as well walk away now, because it's the smallest of the 3 islands that we need to tackle. We've just recently supporting the concept of 3 large islands in the south, the Chatham Islands, Auckland Islands, and Racura. So there's some big investment coming from international funders that want to see these islands predator-free. Watch the space.
Thanks very much, Estelle. It's quite up-to-date information. So, any other questions?
Just in regards to the NPS of Indigenous biodiversity, when are we expecting to see that? Are they going to push that past the election, or is there any indication of that?
Really, Mr. Chair. The last conversations we've had with MFB that they're still intending to get it to cabinet in February. But with the current situation nationally at the moment, I don't know.
Your report always gets a lot of comments because it's very, very in depth and very wide ranging on some topics that really hold a lot of interest with the committee. So thanks very much for that. So look, I'd ask for a mover to note that report, please. Thank you, Morris, and a seconder. Thanks, Paul. All those in favour?
Right.
Against? Carried. Thank you, Ellie. So we'll move to the next item, which is item 3, Catchment Integration Division update. And I assume, Fiona, you'll brief us on this. You have to go and stand up there, or put up there, or you're okay here?
I'll speak to this location if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Alrighty.
Thank you. So look, just again, some highlights. I'll take the report as read. Councillors will see that, you know, we noticed that in actually with recent media attention, a large amount of grass-based wintering happening around Southland. That's something that we are watching quite closely, as are the industry groups as well. And in some ways, you know, the best management practice, the good management practices still apply in those situations. So we're still interested in ensuring that those farmers are ready when stock go on the grass with the baleage in terms of critical source areas and the right buffers in place. What we are aware of some concerns around bales located in the floodway, either between the stock banks or in the wider kind of floodway. And we know that we've learned from sort of a couple of years back that can create a real risk during a flooding event. So as part of our proactive engagement, we will scoop up either areas of concern, particular sites of concern, and also be vigilant looking out for that as we're doing our proactive engagement. And we, just so you know too, the key time for us to work with farmers is prior to stock going on the crop. So it's really critical at the moment and over the next month or two that if there are areas that the community or that you as councillors and Te Manawa representatives see that you're concerned about, the sooner we know about that, the sooner we can go and have a conversation with those farmers and help them be ready for the winter ahead. The other thing just on that topic I will mention is that because we do have the NES requirements for intensive winter grazing in play this winter, we're working very closely with our compliance team and consents team to make sure that we are joined up in terms of communication and the messaging that we are sharing into the community. Also note on page 22, the Hill Country Erosion Fund. So we've been successful in receiving funding from the Ministry for Primary Industries, which we're pretty excited about. It allows us to build on the work we did in terms of the erosion work that Land and Water Science did for us probably a year or two ago. Incorporates the radiometric information that was done some years ago and helps us target where to work with catchment groups and with communities and groups of farmers around erosion management. So those high sediment loss areas, that's a really key task we have to do in terms of helping downstream to look after our estuaries. Highlight the newsletter and the calendar of events we now have in place in terms of environmental education. So this is something that we had done quite some years ago. We're looking to firstly raise awareness of what we're doing in EnviroSkills and environmental education, but also in terms of the calendar, just help prepare for the year ahead and try and provide some clarity to schools and community groups that we're working with. So I encourage you to look at both of those links that we've included in this report. And that is it. Thank you. Happy to take questions.
And Councillor Rodway.
Yes, I was interested to read about the Arawia catchment being one that has a high level of erosion. Certainly, you notice that his berry is often very turbid, particularly in the winter time, produces a lot of dirty water, which discharges into the Waiau near Tuatapere, of course. So, can you elaborate a little bit on that? Do you have an understanding of what some of the causes of that high sediment load could be?
So through you, Mr. Chairman, and without holding all of the technical knowledge in the space, what I understand is that the predominance of mudstone in that catchment very much drives the kind of the erosion susceptibility. And so it's one of those situations, and we have a few of them around Southland, where no matter what land use you put on that type of geology, it's always going to be prone to erosion. So the nature of the management of activities by individual farmers becomes really important on those types of lands, and ensuring that you've got those sufficient buffers in place, thinking about critical source areas. So when it is sediment and colloid phosphorus, there's a really great opportunity for our team to work alongside the farming community in that space. There's a real opportunity to make a difference. So, but as I understand, it's the mudstone. The other thing that I'm led to understand about the Arawia, and still Gail might be able to comment, is that it was historically a really important place for local Māori in terms of kanakana and harvesting. So, which I think is perhaps no longer the case because of some of those high turbid sediment levels. But I'm not sure if there's anything to add there. But so that adds an extra layer of information and knowledge in terms of working with that community.
Councillor McLean.
Just to make a comment on the grass-based wintering, and there was indications that it's obviously feels like there's going to be more grass wintering. Was that based? They wouldn't have the bales out there at the moment, but that was spread out. But I'm just more point that there was obviously a lot of feed made, a lot of bales stacked in paddocks. Like we know we baled twice as much as what we normally do. So I know that will give the opportunity for people to try it if they have got the feed, but may not necessarily indicate that there will be more grass wintering. But one thing with the interim decisions that are coming through, and there's obviously some rules around that, it'd be probably quite good to look at council thought there were more of this going than maybe throwing that out just to indicate what the environment court's indicating may be permitted. Getting people in the head saying not necessarily is some are pretty intense, but there is less intense winter grade grass wintering.
It's a good point you make. Has it been a reflection of the amount of feed that's been made into bales early in the
There's a
season?
huge amount of bales out there, but it's not necessarily for winter grass. It's just purely they bale a lot more.
Or has it been an effective sidestep of regulation too by some of those farmers? What do you think?
And both, and we look at grazing prices, we're seeing, we thought they'd peaked last year and they've cranked up. People are paying north of $600 to winter a cow by the time they truck them. So there is going to be people thinking, yes, we've made extra baleage this year. We've got an opportunity to try and curb some of our inflation that we're not going to do a 20% inflation. I know we talk about rate increases, but when we talk about real inflation on dairy farms, we are scratching 20%. So people are getting creative in how they deal with that, which rightly so they should be.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of comments in response to Councillor McPhail. So it absolutely acknowledged there's been a large amount of supplement made this year. And I guess, we did clarify anecdotal information as opposed to detailed information. What we know from satellite imagery work over the last few years is that the amount of crop across Southland is decreasing. And it's been, even in the last 3 or 4 years, there has been kind of a step down. I don't have the numbers, but there has been a step down in terms of the areas in crop. In terms of the interim decisions that came out prior to Christmas, I would have some hesitation about talking about those, not talking about them, but in terms of implementing those or looking to implement those this year, because they are still before the court, they are still being finalised. What we can absolutely do is focus on the good management practices. So for grass-based wintering, and I'm thinking about properties that we've worked with in the past that have always been grass-based. How do we ensure, depending on the location, how they minimise the risk, how they ensure that, as I said before, critical source areas, buffers, if they're in an area that might be susceptible to water level rise, how are they going to manage the effects of that on land that may have already been grazed? So we absolutely have scope to do that. Probably just, Councillor Farm, and for the councillors, my last comment is, and I'm just reflecting on some of the earlier discussion today, certainly, the proposed water and land plan is absolutely before the courts, and we are seeing a quite clear change in direction in terms of how we are working on our land, how we are looking after our rivers. Now, the challenge is that is before the court, but however, there's a lot of information in there that, we need to be sharing with our farmers and helping them understand what that change means on the ground.
If I could add, not necessarily the rules, they haven't been implemented, but it's actually just given a bit of guidance maybe on what intensity is permitted in regards to that's what I'm saying. There is clear indications within that interim decision, and just saying, well, it's about giving the farmers the information so that they can make those calls on which part of the scope they want to be farming, and I think that would be good. So then they can, the sooner they got that information, the sooner they can adjust.
Yes, sorry, thank you, Chair. Backing up Jeremy, we know what tonnages are being scoped to be looked at. When you move backwards, you then work out your stocking rate. So maybe the stocking rate could be something we could communicate, because we all know it's a stocking rate that creates a lot of the problems. So more just some general comms around it rather than a prescriptive thing.
So you're saying it's more the management than the system.
Happy to take that away and have a look at it, but certainly agree that signalling that change in direction for our community in terms of Hora and Te Manawatu Wai and some of what is being indicated through reports, not just in land management and river management and a range of activities is very important.
Completely different topic, if I might. The education section. Firstly, really delighted to have the newsletter and the calendar of events sorted. Fiona, thank you. But also wondering how we are thinking about engagement with young people, feeding their information and their perspectives back into the organisation. And we've talked about youth council or something more suitable for our environment. And so I'm just wondering how we might be looking at maximising the input into the organisation from that EnviroSchools and environment educational work, as well as the out.
Looking just through you, Mr. Chairman, I think historically we've looked at connecting, particularly with our secondary students, through curriculum and how the schools are structured and going through the schooling system. What we're finding is there's a real interest in engagement in place-based projects, so site-specific projects. And so, for example, the work that we're doing in the Waihopai, so we had a celebration the other day of the planting, that we've got a long-term project there that is focused on a range of kind of benefits, looking to projects like that and then actually accessing some of the structures that are within our schools, rather than trying to set up a new structure. So things like, are we talking to the prefects? Are we talking to the enviro groups and some of those secondary schools in particular, and drawing them in that way? Because that way then I think there's a lot, when there's a place-based kind of topic, it actually appeals to people a lot more, and we don't get perhaps tied up as much as we might otherwise do in some of the sort of strategic planning and curriculum-based activities that happen in schools. So I think I probably would suggest to the councillors in Te Marawa as a whole, we're seeing a real upsurgence in place-based topics. So where people can feel connected, feel like they're making a contribution, and those projects are structured in a way that they're beneficial in terms of the broader outcomes for Hawera and Te Manawa.
This is what Fiona's saying, Mr. Chair. The council came down, the regional council and environmental education staff came down to Bluff last week and at Place, and we had all the Bluff school children visit our predator-free project, our native plant nursery. They did some stuff down on the coast and learned all about some of the environmental issues around pollution and stuff, and it was fantastic. Really, really grateful that the council, making the effort down.
Yeah, can I just add, it's still really important for us as we think about, consultation and engagement going forward, that we use some of the systems that we've already got to access the thoughts and feelings and desires of our young people. And so if, it doesn't have to be a beast of a consultation process. Some of it can be quite informal, as far as, when you've got a group of captured young people, listen to what they have to say, and finding a way to feed that into our broader council decisions around strategic plans and things is really, really important. We don't have to reinvent consultation, because actually we have some vessels to do it already.
I think it's really good points, and your Lyndall, and your day job, there's a lot of pressures on the year 12s and 13s and everyone wants them to be part of their program or their extension. So I think it's important we target.
And you have to look at Headshope School to know that you don't have to be at secondary school to make real things happen.
Yes.
Yeah. And we're up to date actually with Southland Girls on the Waihopai and the Otapuni.
Cool.
Thank you. Just going back on the Aralia stream, the funding with regards to understanding more science. It's a project with land and water, and the booklet will come out. The booklet says here the booklet will be a tool to help empower and educate landowners with their catchments. What learnings are we going to have off that booklet as well? Because we need to be understanding the Aralia, we need to be understanding the erosion. And also, it's a really special area. It's different to quite a few other areas where it's quite steep, but has a lot of hilltop native bush still remaining found. Yeah. When is that report going to be finished, and will it be available to us?
Yeah, so thanks, Stephen. So Erica Woolley, if you want to pop up, so Erica's the team leader for the Ority, and she is leading this piece of work. So you might want to respond to that, Erica, if you're happy.
Yeah, to be fair to everyone, Erica Woolley, catchment team leader. So I've been looking after this project with Hillcatcher Erosion. So the idea was the Araria is it's through the conversation that's already happened, the modelling is kind of highlighted, and obviously local knowledge and intel tell us that's a place where there is biodiversity loss. The idea of picking on the Araria is to have a bit of a start and have a bit of a test of the models that we've got. So we've got 3 lots of models that show erosion loss across Southland, and so it's taking us to a place where we can start comparing what we're seeing on the models to what we're seeing on the ground, and actually start to kind of almost round through. And from that we can have a better understanding of the catchments we should go into after the Araria across the Southland, but then also fine-tuning the models as well, which will also happen as we get more information through the likes of LiDAR and bits and pieces as well. And then from that, I'm hoping that, you know, with the Freshwater Farm Plan conversation and catchment context, that this will start feeding in as well. And start, you know, the idea being that if you are identified as a catchment with high sediment loss, that you have kind of got a menu or some case studies to have a look at, to say, okay, cool, I've got some sort of the same issues here. These are some of the ideas about what I can do. It could be sediment traps, it could be back erosion. Yeah. And obviously also we've got conversations with Maria and Te Marama, some of the looking at aspects of polder and the use of nations and things as well.
It'll be good to see it go back a wee bit. And then that's, I can understand that's assisting to educating landowners. So that's good. I understand what you're saying about the Araria, because it is one of our worst. Worst. Good work.
But we should have, so the project's 1 year, so starting in June this year. And so the idea being that we are bring someone in to do the implementation and the strategy plan by the end of this year. And then the Araria work will start beginning of next year, and we should have some final outcomes by June 2024.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Have you got anything to add to that, Fiona?
Oh, well, just a quick comment, thinking about the upskilling yourselves around some of these sort of place-based issues. We endeavour, and I will keep making sure we do this, to let councillors know when, particularly when we're involved with catchment groups or community groups. For example, in the Aparima area, we've run a number of stream walks. There's another one coming up, which is focused on receiving environment and on Lake George out at Colac Bay. So we ran an event probably a month ago, a community event out of the Waio, and we pulled together information from inside the organisation that in terms of the state of the environment, what we know about the area, anything that we can bring or know around Matauranga Māori and the values for Māori in those areas. And we don't always cover all of those bases, but we do try to pull together some of the information. So do look out for that, those events when they come up. As I say, I think March, I believe, is the Colac Bay event that the Oropoki or the is it? Yeah, when is it, sorry?
Next week.
Oh, it's next week. It's March, isn't it? Right, okay, early March. Yeah, so look out for those events because they're useful learning opportunities, and our focus is having our community out looking at waterways and understanding the value and the health and why it is that you know, we have an interest in looking after those waterways.
Well, thanks very much for that, Erica, coming up and clarifying that. So look, we're all happy. We'll find someone to move that we note that report. I'll do that. Thank you, Linda. And someone second. Thank you, Jeremy. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So we'll move to the next report, which is the catchment plan, the operations division update. Looks good. Who have we got there to come up? Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, Randall. He was in here, he's gone, isn't he?
So we'll probably take it as being read at this stage and try and answer any questions that come from it.
Councillor McPhail.
One question just in regards to up our area and the board taking out the trees. And floodbanks, we don't know if the phone call.
Coming out.
Yeah, we know this.
Dates you're looking for.
The season.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or else there should be.
We've just priced all that up essentially. And, yeah, we'll be looking, Susan.
So within, might be within the next couple of months.
We're hoping.
You'll let us know though, won't you?
You might find.
Yeah, we've got several drop-in sessions next week on that matter actually in Gore, so, yeah, we'll let you know, Alistair, I'll ring you personally then.
Well, the case would be have to be involved in it.
Yeah, absolutely.
It might be good to get that around the councillors, so you can have a few councillors at those sessions. Okay.
Yeah, it's more or less my question, was what's the COGS plan for that week? So, we've got drop-in sessions, what else? Yeah, is there anything?
I think really when I think about it, it's more about explaining the reasons and the need for that. I mean, it's not something we're doing lightly. You know, it's a real concern with trees on stocklands for various reasons, piping, falling over top of them, all sorts of things, scouring. And it's something that I've certainly had a hard line on, and I want to continue that. It's not ideal. We all like trees, but we've actually got to, in my opinion, think of people first. So.
Yeah, and you'll be aware, Dave, if I might, Chairman, we've in town had exactly that kind of issue because some of our trees have gone and in town is unaccustomed to this kind of work, I would suggest. So it's caused a bit of anxiety.
Sure.
And so I wouldn't like for us to repeat the same omissions rather than errors, but just omissions of.
Just Fiona might add something.
Sorry, just through you, Mr. Chairman, there's absolutely COGS plan in place and we are aware of some of those sensitivities. I see Paul has his hand up. When I look at my cell phone. So Paul, you might like to add around how we're going to manage the removal of trees and the communications around that.
Yeah, thanks, Fiona. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Dave's quite correct. We've got drop-in sessions all planned. I think the next week and the week after. Very alive or aware of the trees and how they're viewed within community, but also equally the risk that they can play within our sort of infrastructure. And so the drop-ins are really there to sort of hear from community how they feel, for us to provide information about the trees that we're most concerned about, and to have a conversation around how we will go through the work we will go through. So we suffice to say we learned a little bit from the Waihopai feedback as well. So and the details of those drop-ins will be shared around the councillors if they want to attend. I think I'll leave it at that, but hopefully that's added a bit of clarification.
And I think through you, Mr. Chairman, also, I just think we'll make sure, won't we, when the works are, prior to the work starting, that councillors are aware. Could even just be a message through to all of the councillors that might get inquiries on this topic. Yeah.
It's really important. People love trees, don't they? But as you said, David, it's not until you understand the water's interaction with trees on the flood bank that once you see that, you get it straight away.
Yeah,
they can compromise.
You've only got to turn the TV on at the moment. Admittedly, that's something slightly different, but it's we're basing it on risk, and we have to as a council. And there is a risk to the integrity of the bank. So,
no, very good. Any other discussion? Yes, Councillor Barb.
Yeah, I'll just to reiterate, it's obviously very visible. Like we in the middle of war, and so certainly we'll get a bit of interest, I'd say. I suppose the main thing is to make sure that explain that this wasn't just because of what the last 2 weeks is happening up north. This has been a well planned, understanding the flood here for quite some time, and something we do. Just in regards to the Te Anau and dock scenario, sorry, Phil, it might not be your side of the business here, but it did say that they were having a meeting in regards in February, and I'm just wondering if that had happened, dock staff or not, or
Through you, Mr. Chair, we had a meeting last Monday with TNL's operations manager, John Lucas, and councillors Evans, McDonald, and Roy were there, as well with Barry Taylor from representing the Liberty Committee and myself. Had a good positive discussion, discussed the issues there with the funding, that sort of thing, and got a cautious buy-in from John that things like grazing trials and cut and carry type trials could proceed, develop a methodology and put that out to the key stakeholders and make sure that everyone's aware of it, and certainly that John and his department these trials perhaps late June, early July, something this year.
Yeah, look, I'll just back that up. There's a wish to do something on those trials, but we sort of left it to go back and have a look at the rule book and make sure everything's picked off. And Councillor Evans was there too. Would you like to add anything to that into your local area?
There's some good actions and the Whitestone, some good conversation as well. Good to talk to John as well. There are issues with regulations, but also the company code that has been trialled there has been working well, and it's not a profit solution. It's at the cost of the farmer to do that. The years, I think it was 10 years to get it to the point where it was cut and carry. And there are limitations on the Whitestone with regards to collected and collected fish, such like which the beach skimming sort of alleviate that. There's still some more work to be done upstream, which is noted where the access for upstream. And just see you going flat out with this. Where the access is for the upstream hasn't been repaired since the last event across the road or above the Whitestone Bridge. Culverts are laying there, but there hasn't been actually any ground over it. We've got to do some action up there and a few more walks up from the bridge. We're doing a little bit of work below. Understanding of that.
Okay, thanks very much, Phil. Have you got anything to add here?
Absolutely, sorry. It's more like John Lucas myself yesterday, but I wasn't discussing that at all, I'm sorry. So in Ruahuku based, it's kind of
Thank you very much. Morris.
Thank you. I'm just a little concerned about the potential for raising in the river burns in that area. It conflicts with our goals to try and improve water quality in these rivers, because that will inevitably allow greater input of people matter, nutrients and other contaminants that we're trying to get out of our rivers. Program to try and reduce the amount of those going in. So I think that we should be really concerned if a grazing regime is proposed inside of those burns. This has been going on for many, many years, and I know it's always been a contentious issue, but I think now there's even greater need to protect water quality and look for other solutions. Certainly the beach skimming trial looks to be quite good. I know it's been very successful at on the Upper Arena at Rose Bush, that Arena's done in conjunction with river engineers such as Henry Hudson, and they have a proper plan there to look at the whole reach and to manage it so that natural character is protected and enhanced. That's the sort of program I think we should be looking at, rather than other ones that might risk the increase of water pollution.
I'll come to you, so I'll just respond to that. So I was at the meeting. We did discuss, Paul took us to an area of the beach, the prospect of a beach skimming type operation there, but we're all very clear that we were proposing something, and everyone wants to go back to their own camps and see what could be done. So there was no pushing the button on a way forward there. But the best part about that meeting is that we're all there as Estelle at place, so we could understand everyone's point of view. So yeah, a lot of water to go under that bridge, I would think. Morris anyway. So I'll go to Alistair. Question.
I know, I was just going to make the comment that spraying's not viable either because of water quality issues. Can you skim that, those large areas that are down the side of the White Stone? I'm not sure.
Okay, no, that's very good.
The idea of the Whitestone trials is that beach skimming is one part of the thing. The next section is this section of road area where floodplains are here. So what the trials cut and carry or grazing, and that area from the back of the beach, I suppose you'd say, to the back of the fairway. And one of the things that we're proposing to do when we draft up this methodology and put it out to the affected parties is that we'll be proposing to do things like water sampling and things like that to see what the actual effect is. The guy that's going to be running the sheep grazing trials proposing to put sheep in there for a few weeks during June and July over a reasonably large sort of section there, just to graze down that high rank Cox brook and double on the weeds and that sort of thing. And it's after the carrying a junction, it's a trial, so we'll try and see whether it works or not. I think that it's successful, it can be used as offsetting the constant need to avoid lots of herbicide.
I think it's a work in progress, and we'll see where it goes. Any further questions, Marsh? You continue on. Yeah.
The other option would actually some of that land which is grazed currently, that is in private land, obviously. That should never have been turned into farmland. And with this problem throughout our rivers, we know that with increasing flooding we're going to have in the future, it's going to be more of a problem rather than less of a problem. So we need to have a holistic plan, our catchment plan. So we know from what's happened in the East Coast, there are places where it's not going to be viable to continue to do the things that we're doing on some bits of those land. This is a difficult question, I know, and a difficult issue. It's very emotional, but it's something that this council really needs to look at rather than trying to do the same old stuff that we've always tried to do. We have to have a different approach.
Yeah, I'm not the same.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to round that off, I think this continues some work we did some time ago around what are the options for managing those river birds. So, we looked at there was planting of poplars, was it? I think probably in terms of the grazing conversation, maybe managed grazing is a good way of putting it, because I think the perception is that would be wide scale allowing, animals onto the riverbed. It's more managed grazing of small stock for short periods of time. But absolutely take your point. There are other options that we should look at, and thinking about a whole of catchment plan is an enormously important part, as we're doing in other parts of the region, to help prioritise and actually decide what actions are best in which parts of the catchment.
The general theme of the meeting is that we know we'll probably come up against a brick wall pretty quickly when it comes to the CMS, most likely, or things along that line. But we've got to keep coming back to talk to find those solutions, however we do that, because there's a few things that are getting harder and harder for people to keep funding large spraying operations and actually the spray itself. But I take your point, Morris. So there's some positives to come out of that. So any further questions?
Yes.
Yes.
Just one thing, thank you, Paul, you identified that the key point was over a period, there was a trial, there was a prospect of over 4 weeks, seasonality and reduction of herbicides. There are areas, Morris, in the Whitestone where there's been 8 foot of topsoil removed in the riverbed, and skimming will not be viable if you're going to be removing 8 foot of topsoil to get the skimming. Where the ponds are, you drive around by the ponds, and it's well over your head what they've had to take off to get into the gravel to the ponds. So ultimately, at the end of the day, skimming is not the end all. I'm sure there is good grazing land there that can be utilised without access to the river. And it's another way, a one-off trial, but I think regulatory wise, it may not be covered. We would like it to be. Let's try. Council on Landowners.
Okay, well, we might, unless there's any other discussion, we just might wrap that item up. So look, can I have a mover to note that? Please. Thanks, Alistair, seconder, please. Morris. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Thanks very much. That was. So we'll move to item 5, contracts in progress on works. So Randall, yep, if you can come up, please, that would be great. Just before you start there, I'll just interrupt you. Just had noticed that Alistair, you moved a report. You're not technically on this committee. So we may should go through that process once again.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, we'll follow that up.
We'll follow that up.
It's not on the list.
I think we'll just follow that up, but for the purposes of this meeting,
Yeah, it was on this.
we might take them.
The rest of the insurance.
There's regular.
I'm happy to swap out.
Okay.
I couldn't do whatever he did.
Moving.
Councillor Gibson rather than me, sorry. We're similar in stature, I'll just swap it.
So yeah, that gave us a wee bit of a speed wobble there. We're back on track now. So it's Randall, can you please speak to your report and anything of note?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll take the report as read and would actually just welcome any questions or forums.
Very good report. It's obviously showing you all the money flow.
Water's flowing.
Thanks. Jeremy, anyone second that, please? All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thanks very much, Randall. Thanks, Aidan.
See you tomorrow.
So we'll move to item 6, integrated catchment management group working plan. So. Yeah.
So our esteemed manager, Paul Potts, has prepared this report, and I'll just speak to it briefly on his behalf. So essentially, very briefly, what you'll see here is firstly on page 45, an overview, just to be really clear on the purpose of our ICM groups, or all the teams that sit within our group in terms of what we're wanting to achieve. And there's quite a range of activities actually, from very much the operational that we've just heard about through to some of that, how do we think in a more catchment focused, integrated way, and that alludes to Councillor Rodwicki, some of the comments you were making, some of the discussions we've had in our liaison committees around, either erosion management plans or integrated catchment plans. And we see reference to that as well in terms of the work that the regional forum did around catchment planning. So in terms of then, I guess what Paul has done on the following pages is not highlight all of the projects we're involved with, but some key projects that we are we will report on to this committee. So key projects around each of the main catchments, so the Matoda, including the sub-catchments, obviously the Waio, the Oreti and Aparima. So you'll expect to see reports on those, and the schedule is on page 47 and 48 of how we will report on those. And the intention is that we are providing a report not on what one of our divisions is doing, but what we as an organisation are delivering across that catchment. and touching on some of the key pieces of work that are underway and the key issues underway in each of those main catchment areas. And then you'll see projects 4 through to 7, which are other key projects, again, not the only pieces of work our teams are involved with, but key pieces of work we know that are of interest to our community and to this committee in terms of work program. And then, as I say, the following pages have a time frame in terms of when those reports will be provided. And I am happy to take questions.
Surely we've got a question.
Just a comment.
Thank you.
Good to see that this style of update is coming through. Brings some consistency across all the committees.
So looking at the table on page 47. See we've got relevant dates here for the McGrath on April 2023. So how will that occur?
Yes, because that will come in advance of the next regional services committee meeting. I will actually follow up with Paul as to the forum by which we'll actually present those reports to, whether they come through to a council meeting.
Or a workshop, something.
Could potentially be at a workshop actually. No, that's something I'll come back to the committee on in terms of how that will happen. But conscious obviously that the next time we'll meet won't be for I think 3 months for this committee. So and we want to be able to start drip feeding those through more frequently than the committee meetings. Yeah.
Unless there's any further discussion, I'll ask that someone could move that report, please. Thanks, Paul. And someone to second. Thank you. Well, and all those in favour? Carried. Thanks very much. Yeah. So that brings into all our standing items. So we're going to move to number 10, which is verbal update. So these are always very interesting. I'm keen to hear about your stoat that's giving you quite a bit of jip.
Yes, yeah, kia ora tātou. It's always a pleasure, Mr. Chairman, just provide a verbal report and update of what's happening at the Department of Conservation to Papa Atawhai. And I'd love it if Estelle and Gail, my Ngāi Tahu colleagues, could chip in too. You may know some more stuff, especially Raki Ora and Te Anau, which I don't have privy to. I caught up with John Lucas, our operations manager from Te Anau yesterday, as well as Jen Ross, our operations manager at Raki Ora. For those who don't know me, I'm Phil Malbrin, Senior Ranger Community based here in the Murihuka district here in Invercargill. Councillor Paul Evans asked about the incursion in Fiordland, and I was talking to John yesterday. I don't have an exhaustive blow-by-blow description of what's going on, but you mentioned the stoat. There's a male stoat they can't trap, and for the life, he's very happy to show himself off in cameras, but he won't go near traps. And John just rolled his eyes and said, look, he may die of old age before we get him, but they've taken a significant amount of predators through this incursion, resolution in Chalky Islands. I heard there was the last rat trap was on Sunday, the northern path, I think it was Chalky on a rock. So that, there's still things happening there. On Resolution Island, a rock wren survey was undertaken, 10 working days worth of work, and found none. Still a lot of mice around, and they suspect that rock wren have disappeared off Resolution, which isn't good. A lot of further survey work must be undertaken to confirm that though. Ulver Island is another issue for us. There are rats there and there's so much food, they're not interested in our trapping. Sandy King and her dog Gadget did find a nest, and we were able to dig that out. But there are still rats on Ulver, doing well from what we can see. There are also a couple of deer have swum across too, and they're on Ulver as well. So we have some issues with Ulver at the moment. So there's quite a lot going on. And as I said before when Ali was here, thanks very much to the Regional Council for all your support with the incursion in Fiordland. It's much appreciated. We've had people from all over New Zealand helping us out. both dock staff and non-dock staff as well, so it's been good. We had on Monday the 13th, the HMNZS Canterbury left for Operation Endurance, which is our work on the Subantarctic Islands, and we're down to Campbell Island. They were there for 2 days doing some work, got quite a lot of work done before they recalled because of Cyclone Gabriel. And so the Canterbury, I believe, today has arrived up in Napier, helping with the cyclone relief there. For Murahuku, it's basically been business as usual. We've been doing mohua, surveying in the Catlins, as well as hoiho, yellow-white penguin work there. I think there's been about 26 penguins fledged, which has been good. There are at least 37 chicks spawned, but there's been a diphtheria has hit them hard over this season, as in previous seasons too. Also respiratory distress syndrome. And some of the very young chicks is taken its toll as well. Like it's probably, I was asked, and it might have been Councillor Morris Rodway, or might have been Councillor Eric Roy asked last time I was here about Hudson track conditions in Fieldwood. Well, I asked John about that, and I've got a bit of an update here. As you know, with the big event back in February 2020, the hut at Lake Howden is gone, and because of the site and the instability, that we're not going to rebuild the hut there. But we are looking at putting a shelter and some toilets in there, and that's that work is scheduled for March, and it should take 3 to 4 weeks with a contractor supply chains permitting. The chasm at the moment is still closed. We're looking at reopening that site in April. Hollyford track, reinstatement of the easy tramping track. That's work that's been going on. Track clearance and constructions underway between Lake Alabaster and Martins Bay. And that hopefully will be again about completed by winter anyway this year. That's probably all I've got there. I know there are some bridges that are being looked at Lake Sylvan, Glenorchy, Bedford Stream at Dark Track, and Poseidon Milford Track. We're having some engineers re-looking at what we can do to improve the structures that are there. That's probably all I've got to say about that.
It's only 50.
Yeah. Sorry. But yeah, any questions? Good. Sorry, Mr. Chairman.
I was just going to say, Alba Island, it's obviously the centerpiece. Well, I wouldn't say obviously, but it's one of the centerpieces, you could say, to the visitor experience at Rekiura.
Yeah, it is.
And what a stark, I just want to make a comment, what a stark reminder it is on how hard predator-free is going to be to achieve in that respect. So is the location of the island its own worst enemy that close when you say you've got deer and rats obviously swimming? Any comment on that, Phil or Sal?
Absolutely, it is because rats do regularly swim. We've done DNA testing, and we've found they come from the neck, which is not very far away. But look, so long as we've got good resources like Sandy King, the dog gadget, and we've got good monitoring ongoing, so long as we keep on top of that, we should keep on top of it. And it is a challenge. There's still a lot of good bird life there, despite these beasties being present, but we'll do our best to get rid of them.
I could add to that too, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Phil. It's like comparing apples and oranges with Alba and the main island of Rakira. So it's really hard to maintain a predator-free status on an island when the main island around it is on fire, literally. So it might seem like it's a difficult task if we can't keep Alba Island predator-free. How are we going to do the main island? Completely different approach. So the main island doesn't have the biodiversity that Alba does. So the approach for eradication is going to have to be completely different, and it's achievable. The beauty of that will mean that because the whole of the Rakira islands are surrounded by a massive ocean, biosecurity won't be as much of an issue as it is on a wee island in the middle. So, yeah. So I think while over, it's an issue that we've got. Rodents, Norway rats are re-established on Ulva Island. If we can just maintain that suppression, unless and until predator-free Rakiura becomes a reality, then
So in regards to that, the Bluff community, do we have to speak to that in the quarantine? How that will play too, and then we've got our airport, so points of contact. Is when we talk about predator-free Rakiura, do we have to talk about Bluff also?
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I could speak to that again, the work we do at Morteport, where the port that services the island as well as Rakiura, I mean, and even Dunedin and other areas as well. I think what we'll be doing is with the restoration of Rakiura and the reintroduction of species to the island, it'll also create a feeling of ownership from the community as well. To have Kiwi and Kakapo thriving on Rakiura will help to create that important biosecurity work that we're already undertaking at our port, and we'll be supporting other ports to do the same. And it's being done in other places. I was on Waiheke Island on Monday, and they're in the middle of a predator-free project there, removing stoats and rats, and they have ample biosecurity for all of the vessels going back, and they have 10,000 people living on Waiheke. So Great Barrier is another example. Rangitoto, they all have predator-free status and have maintained that for several years with their quarantine projects. So we can do the same here, no problem.
Absolutely.
It takes investment though.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, I might make the comment too. I'll encourage councillors to get hold of Estelle and David Swan with the work they've been doing on Motapuri, Bluff Hill, because what they're doing there is fantastic. The level of technology they're using and good support from the regional council is fantastic. It really is really good. Trialing, new sorts of traps. It's worth a look, really is. And
Predator suppression's not like it used to be. That's all I can say. It's mechanised now. It's very technical, and it's a game changer.
Sure is.
That's really encouraging to hear that. So have we got any other questions for Phil at all? Okay, thanks very much for that. Really, so
I think you need to get away. We've got no media here.
No, we are online, so
Yes,
Online.
we are.
we are going into public school.
We're about to go to public exclusion.
so
Yeah.
you'll just want to. Thanks for that, Phil. Oh, are you okay to wait? Carl, we'll just move into public excluded. So we're going to move into public excluded now, and could I first, would you like to tell us the reasons why we do take that?
Remember the committee.
Yes.
To enable any local authority holding information to carry out without prejudice or disadvantage commercial activities, and also to protect the privacy of natural persons, including that of deceased natural persons.
Thank you very much. Can I please have a mover for that to go into in a seconder? Thank you, John. And all those in favour? Aye. Against?